Welcome, everyone. This is From Angel to Exit. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. Our guest today is Alan McLaren. He is co-founder at Strata Originals, has a long history of working with a series of companies, member of YPO. I'm excited to talk with him about just his business experience and the companies he's been involved in, his own entrepreneurial experience, and the groups he's working with, the founders, the leaders that he's working with to help them with their process and the insight he has on this whole journey of scaling and exiting and what that means and what that how that works. So with all that, Alan, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Bruce. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, it's fun to have you on. So before we dive into the work you're doing today and kind of getting into the details of the insights you've seen around this space, we'd love to just get some backstory, right? What was your, kind of professional experience? How did you get into the businesses that you were in? Give us a little of the story.
So the story started way back because I'm not young anymore, as all of you can see. But I started with Canon and Icon. I was in the business equipment business to start my life. So in corporate Canada, corporate America. And as you know, when you move over to the entrepreneurial world, it's not the same as being in a corporation, but the experience in corporation teaches you, for me anyways, it taught me about what limitations really mean and how decisions can be made. And so I spent 16 years in that industry, moving around, mostly in Canada, and then, kind of worked my way up the chain to ultimately my first president's job in 1999. And then I moved over to IT security, where I ran a NASDAQ listed company, which again is another experience running a publicly traded company, which is a whole other animal, 10Ks and, managing by 90 days and all that other crappy stuff, which I will never do again. But ultimately went into the entrepreneurial world in a partnership in IT security. So one of the businesses that I sold off there, a nice 3-year run, that was building a business literally from scratch, finding new customers. And that gave me the bug for entrepreneurship. And I went from there and then opened a marketing agency, believe it or not, because I thought there was a big gap in the world, 20 years ago now. And then moved into this world called personal branding. Over the last 2 years, we saw a gap in the market and said, there's so much opportunity for distribution of great messages today, but people aren't doing it well. So maybe we can help people through that, and that's kind of how we came to today.
Yeah. Cool. I'm curious, like when you were young, did you know you wanted to start a business and exit a business? Like what was the kind of
No, I
guess, did
you
you
always
have
get
any
that.
role
Did you
models?
have the passion? No, I was a horrible student. I wanted to be a professional football player. I was 5'9", 180 pounds, so I was pretty stupid. Or arguably, I didn't see any limitations. So whatever I had learned in my life, I could apply to business because I had very little fear. I would be the first one in the pool. And so that helped me both on the corporate side and the entrepreneurial side. But I never had a vision. As a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you, it's a bit of a get out there and let stuff hit you. Do things as well as you can. And opportunities will show up on your doorstep. And that's what happened to me. So I got choices to make. And ultimately, even the entrepreneurial journey was a little reluctant because nobody's giving you a salary. You got to eat what you kill, and there's a lot of stuff, as entrepreneurs know, it's not for the faint of heart. It was certainly not planned out, but it worked out pretty well in the end.
Yeah. But, a lot of experience in corporate, right, with some pretty big names and an experience with public companies. I guess, what did you feel like you learned there that you were, kind of able to apply or that helped you when you actually got into an entrepreneurial situation?
About process. I think that if I look at Icon as an example, Icon, they were all GE trained executives, so they were deep into process and deep into P&Ls. And so really understanding, I was never a numbers guy, I was more of a sales guy. But then I learned how P&L and balance sheets and how critical that was to obviously running a business. So it wasn't a seat of your pants operation when I started as an entrepreneur. I knew the basic things I had to measure, and so I knew what was working and what wasn't. So when I had my crazy ideas, I say, okay, well, let's apply some process to it and some discipline to it. So that's what I learned. Also learning that too much process gets in the way of creativity and design thinking. And so allow yourself the freedom to think, but make sure you're measuring it so you know when to quit or when to push hard.
Put a few guardrails around it.
Always, because you know what entrepreneurs do, right? We have nobody holding us back. The only people you talk to is either your board or your bank. Other than that, you're free reign, which is both good and bad, right? You could be running into a brick wall and you can't see it. Thank goodness you have YPO, and those who are in YPO know this. You have a forum to kind of keep you from kind of falling off the cliff when you can't see it.
Yeah.
I think having a great set of board of advisors around you is also important.
Yeah. I think my forum group averted me from a few cliffs, both professionally and personally.
Absolutely,
I know that.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. Like you mentioned that when you started the business, or where you got more into the entrepreneurial space, you weren't a 19-year-old coming out of high school with this crazy business idea, and you can throw caution to the wind. Like, what were some of the considerations, or kind of adjustments you had to make, or things you had to decide when going from a corporate world that has a lot of structure and certainty and trappings around professionally and personally to starting your own venture? Like, what was that decision like?
I'll blame my business partner, Leanne, for that 100%. So we were together at this company called Jaws, which was the IT security firm. She was responsible for marketing and PR. And then we moved over to the one companies that we'd sold off, and we joined as partners. When we finished our 3-year run, she came to me and said, "What are we going to do now?" And I went, "What do you mean we? I'm going to go find a job somewhere as a CEO. We'll be friends for life. Just why don't we start a business?" I said, "Well, we don't have any ideas. We don't have any money. Of course, why not do that?" And that's
Perfect. Sounds great.
That's exactly what happened. So Leanne really had the idea to say we should do something together because we worked well together. And obviously we've been business partners for 25 years now under 2 businesses, and that's quite a run. But that was it. It was that leap. And of course, going back to my wife and saying, "Honey, here's the idea." There's no idea. But here's a leap of faith. Yeah. And that is ultimately was the goal. And then we started with a computer and no idea other than we thought we had a good way to build a marketing agency, and that's what happened.
Yeah. And what what do you think made you two such good partners? Because I'm always fascinated by companies that are started by partners. Like what worked between the two of you that made you feel like, hey, yeah, this is the person to go with?
So the first thing is, and it's overused, but it's values. You have to be aligned on how to treat a customer, how to treat your employees. Like those things are table stakes that most entrepreneurs don't talk about. They kind of get into it and figure out their styles. What's also unique is we learned how to work together because she's full on ADHD and I'm kind of process guy. So I had to come a little her way and she had to come a little my way. I know I came a little more her way than she came my way. But what we learned was that the discussions we had when we looked at a problem together, we're coming at it from really 2 different places. Recognizing that each of our brains would make it better, we had to learn to work together because we're very passionate about our ideas. But what we learned was we need to respect the others because it would make the idea better if we work together on it. And to this day, we still get frustrated with each other, but it's because we're so passionate about solving the problem. It's not really with each other, it's how we're thinking about it differently. And then at the end we go, wow, that was magic. But it sometimes takes a while, but that was really the key, is trusting each other, caring about each other, and of course, caring about the business. And that we've done for, again, 25 years.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you didn't necessarily have, the idea or, a specific business model. Like, tell me a little bit about that process. Like, what was the exploration? How did that, when did you feel like you first had an idea that you could actually start getting some traction and start scaling?
Well, what we saw was, typically the first thing was we looked at the marketing agencies and saw the bait and switch in the world where the big gals would come in and pitch, and then they'd hand you a junior person. And we said, we don't want to build that kind of agency. So the vision was we wanted to be front and center with our clients strategically. Of course, we'd have a team behind us, but you would never lose that contact with us. And that's how we built it. So we purposely wanted to keep it small and, lifestyle business, however you want to define it, but no more than 25 employees so we could actually do it. And we actually did that, and we ended up targeting some small to medium-sized businesses, and ended up servicing a couple of billion-dollar businesses because we did such good work. They were saying, we want to work with you. And we were saying, no, no, no. You're too big and too crazy. But we found the right situation to do that. So the idea really was about making sure we could service our customers effectively and also get a lot out of it, because our thrill was when they were successful, that was the win for us. Money was important, building the business was important, but that came as a result of having, good results for our clients.
Yeah. And I guess how have you approached this whole topic, or over the course of your kind of career, this idea of exiting? Like, has this always been something like you've thought about, or is this like when you start or get involved in things, like it's like, okay, we're going to put together a 5-year, 10-year plan, and then we're going to be out, and this is the valuation we want? How has this worked for you?
So this needs to be honest, right? Okay, let's be honest. I work mostly with
It's going to be
people.
more interesting.
Yeah, it would be more interesting. The truth is, no. We didn't start with the end in mind in that respect. The John Warburlow writes some good stuff on that kind of a work, but we decided we would just do the best job we could, and may the results fall where they may. But funny enough, with the clients that we work with, we have exactly that conversation, because they're, when you're dealing with agencies are tough, especially in today's world. When you are really, all your intellectual property is in your brain, that's tough to scale. And then you end up being part of it for 10 years. So we decided we would build some good businesses, and then, and take the money from that. And if we had an exit, then it would be great, but it wasn't that big a deal. However, with our clients, it's a different conversation, because in the world of personal branding, which is where we are today, we're shaping people's narratives so that if they're an angel today and they're going to an exit, that's an intentional process. And if it's a technology business, well, that's got to exit. That is the reason why you get into that kind of stuff. So not for us, but for every one of our clients, for sure, there's a conversation around that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, because I think there are sort of different types of businesses, right? And you end up in these kind of, more lifestyle kind of personal service businesses versus, venture-backed startups who are, they're on a runway, right? Like that you have to get them exit at some point for the investors to get their money out and stuff. I guess, where do you see, how does it change things, or how have you noticed sort of the different types of entrepreneurs, or the different types of people that get involved in these businesses? Are there any patterns that you've seen? Yeah,
the pattern is they're losing their minds every single day, and I'm not joking about that. I mean, really, they end up focusing so intently on their business, they forget about the other things that older guys recognize, that make deposits in the other parts of your life, your physical and mental health, your family, all those things. So they get caught up on the hockey stick, the runway, to use a Canadian analogy, which is fine. You could have that success and have an exit, and then what do you have left? You've just burned everything behind you. And so what I try to do when I work with both our clients and mentor younger people is, look, if you're choosing to lose an 80-hour week, that's a choice of yours. But carve out 10 hours for your family. Carve out 5 hours for yourself, because you don't want to be 45 and be, overweight and, and have heart problems because of all the stress of the last 20 years. Find it's not balance. Balance is such a bad word, but it's find a way to get back to balance, whatever that is. You can still be successful, and if it takes you another year, you're doing it healthily and with, hopefully a loving family, because your kids are only your kids young once, and you don't want to lose them.
Yeah, they're only kids for a while.
Right? And so I find them very myopic, and what I try to do is say, be myopic when you need to be a myopic, but forget there's a life. You're here to build a life, not just a business. Yeah.
It's interesting. I certainly find there are 3 buckets in this. You've got the people that really struggle, right? Yeah, they everything's in the business, and they don't put any investment anywhere else.
That's right.
And the best case is that they exit. Now they've got all their resources, and they kind of make up for it, right? Like they go back and kind of try to fill in the gaps, and then try to repair as much as they can. Then you've got these people who, kind of balance. I will say, okay, I'm going to work maybe 70, not 80 hours a week, and I'm going to, find a couple. I'm going to go out with my wife or my partner or husband or whatever, like once a week, right? I'm going to do the bare minimum, and I'm going to try to keep it going as best I can. And then I find I've met several folks now that has been impressive in that they figure out, and I think it's somewhat as a mindset, and somewhat as certainly strategies, but it's mindset is like, I have to do both. Like by balancing, by investing in my physical fitness, mental fitness, my relationships, my family, my kids, that actually helps me be a better entrepreneur, a better leader, a better CEO. And I'm curious where you see some of these folks that are able to actually integrate these things in a really positive way, not as a trade-off, but as like a reinforcing, synergistic thing. Like, have you noticed that, and what are they doing?
So I think it comes back to your earlier point about depending on the type of business and who your bosses are. As Bob Dylan once said, you got to serve somebody, right? The devil or the Lord, you got to serve somebody. So if you're VC backed, you don't have that control. They're expecting you to be, on time for everything you do, and very few of those firms are saying, well, just invest in your family, invest in your right.
Take another year.
But if you have a way to have some sort of autonomy, because I think you're right, there is a formula to success, but you need the strength and the conviction to be able to push back on these folks and go, listen, man, you could crush me in 3 years and you're going to have a crappy investment, or you can allow me the time to do that. But it's hard to have those conversations with people, who are older than you, have more experience than you, and have exited 100 times. So so it's rare that you find the entrepreneur, at least that I have, that has that balance, unless they're on their third or fourth business, because now they have the experience. And people will go, no, I'm just going to leave Bruce alone. This dude knows what he's talking about, or this person knows what they're talking about. So I think it's a question of when they're very young, they just don't have the fortitude to do that. They might be incredibly talented, but I was just having a conversation with a very successful, he's almost at $1 billion. You know what his biggest problem was? His partner. That was it. I said, dude, so I started talking to him through that. We weren't talking about the business is doing well, because he was going, oh my God, I feel so bad. I said, that's dragging you away from what's important, so find a way. And anyways, I gave him a little bit of advice. I'm not a psychologist, but I've been married a long time, so I understand the drill. So that's they've got to try to work out what's good for them and for their business and for their health and all the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I think for some of these folks who have a couple nice exits, right? I mean, they've got resources, right? They have, they're not beholden to the situation nearly as much as a first-time entrepreneur, particularly a first-time entrepreneur who's, put everything into this business, right? All of their, financial, future, their personal future, their professional reputation, who hasn't, created a good set of relationships around them otherwise, right? Like, and it becomes so overwhelming, and so like they are, it's critical for them to be successful in this thing. They don't have a choice, right? And they really get stuck in these situations. And
they get, what you're seeing today, and we know that there's a mental health crisis, but CEOs are not happy today. Founders are not happy today. I mean, you deal with them all the time in the work that you do, and so I see it from a different context, but it's the same thing. I'm going, wow, they're just struggling. And so how do we get people to some sort of a central balance of purpose or something that allowed them to live their lives while this should be, it's not easy to build a business, but you should try to enjoy parts of it, I would hope. But why are you doing it? Just for money? Yeah. We know that that's not the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and we've talked to a couple of people on this program already where, if all you're doing it for is the money, you're probably going to run into problems, right? Yeah. You're probably going to have some pretty good big things to work through after the exit because, money is a great resource, but it doesn't, in and of itself, is not fulfilling. So it's like understanding that. Have you seen any, or do you have any kind of thoughts or recommendations or things that you've seen for earlier stage founders in terms of practically how to, how to answer some of these questions or grapple with some of these questions and create a little bit more balance in some of these earlier stages?
It sounds a little simplistic, but, you kind of lay out the goals for the business and the goals for your life, right? You've seen those wheels before where you say, I've got business, spirituality, whatever those things are. Yeah. Find out those things that matter to you. And you might be single and, wild child. Then good, you're good. But If you want to at some point settle down, then you've got to figure out where that, the wedge of that pie is. But if today you know that I need to have health and wellness, which has to be on everybody's bucket, I think that, you're a big health guy, you get that, because it makes you a better CEO when you're healthy and energetic. So find out those 4 or 5 buckets and make sure, you're time blocking them and you're investing in those things. So I time block yoga for me. Yoga is 4 times a week. It's 4:30 to 5:30 every day. And I very rarely miss it. And people, well, how do you do that? My calendar doesn't allow people to book me during that time. Now there's exceptions when there's emergencies, but they're very rare. And then I block out these other things. Okay, we're going to dinner, we're doing this. And I try to treat them as sacred. Business is no more important than personal. So that's what I would say to people. And if you decide you want to work 80 hours a week, work backwards from the 165 hours you have and recognize I got to sleep 6 or 8 or whatever it is. Fitness 5, and then you can say, okay, now I've got something I can work with, as opposed to just seat of your pants, getting to the office at 6 and leaving at 10 and, letting the chips fall where they may. That's not how you live a life of enjoyment, at least in my view.
Yeah. I do a lot of this work of, and I call it defensible calendar, like building a calendar that, is the right allocation of your time and energy based on your priorities and goals, and then how do you create systems and structures to defend it? Time is your ultimate resource, right? Like I can make more money, I can do all this, I can't create more time.
And Bruce, we all talk about this thing called presence, right? When you are running around like a chicken with his or her head cut off, when a staff member's talking to you and you're on your phone or you're half distracted, you're not a good leader. When your spouse, your partner's talking to you and your head's on a spreadsheet, you're not listening to them. You're going to pay for that. So you've got to just decide to say, when I'm spending a minute with someone, it's a minute and it's their minute, or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. End of story. That's a skill you need to learn in your life, in your marriage, in your kids, with whatever. And that's what I find that they, and then people give them he's really busy or she's really busy, and they work really hard. Yeah, but you got to give deposits for humans in life. That's where I find the challenge. And you have a good plan. You might throw off the plan every once in a while. That's okay. You're going on a money raise. Okay, you're 60 days full out for that. That's great. Yep. But your partner knows that, and they're okay with it because you've made the deposits before.
Exactly. Like you can do that without significant consequences because you've made the investment and you've got the deposits 100%. Already. If you haven't done that, that's where these things become really critical.
They wonder why they get in trouble when they come home and then go play golf for 2 days and they're gone with their buddies drinking. So, I don't want to sound like a psychologist, but a business is part of your life and the biggest part of your life. Yeah. You got to enjoy your life, I think. Maybe it's an old man's perspective. I don't know.
Well, it probably is, but it probably should be a younger person's perspective as well. I'm curious on the exit side, in your own experience and the work that you've done with some of these folks, what are the things that really drive, successful exits, whether it's on the valuation side or whether it's just, the drama around the exit or clarity or, what it gets somebody in terms of, post-exit, professional situation or personal situations? What are some things that you've noticed, successful or good leaders have done early in the process?
So let me work backwards, if I may, from the exit, right? I have never seen someone exit and say, that was amazing. I don't care how much money they have in the bank. 20 million, 100 million. It was like they were put through the ringer, right? So, and you know this, you've dealt with these people all the time, these folks all the time. And I'm sitting there going, you got $30 million liquid cash in the bank, and you're no happier than before you started this process. Something wrong with that. So again, I don't necessarily have the answers on what you can do, but just maybe to understand that you're going to pay a price for this exit in some way. You've just got to understand when going into the exit, what that's going to be about, because it's not a happy. So you get that LOI and you go, look at me. Well, the LOI is just a little baby step. It's not the right. We're done. No. There's a little bit of due diligence happening.
Oh yeah. But and the LOI tends to be the peak.
But it is that peak of happiness. But I think the one thing I would say to you, one of our clients is an M&A lawyer. Get yourself a great M&A lawyer or a great investment banker, or whatever that is. that will do the dirty work for you, and make sure you understand the expectations up front, because it can get pretty ugly, as you know. And the idea is to try to make it as least ugly as possible, because there is a beautiful thing at the end, and it's cash. But you've got to really know your best outcome, right? It's back to, your bat now. What is your best alternative? What is that for you? And then just say, okay, and let everybody else do the dirty work, and just try to, although it's really hard. Don't spend the 20 million because it may be 10, maybe 5. So I think expectations management, emotional management, fitness, mental health. And the other thing I will say is, huge mistake is don't take your eye off the performance ball while you're going through this. Because if you do and things drop, they can adjust the price. And so that will really, you're going, valuation today. Yeah, but they don't have a check on your desk yet. So make sure you're performing.
Yeah, you haven't signed the deal.
So the deal's not the deal until that money is in your bank account. So continue to perform, and don't be dreaming about getting out and taking a breath. It's not over till it's over, and that could take 6, 7, 8 months. That would be my advice.
Yeah. I do find that it's there's this kind of hard balance between, yes, I want to sell, but I have to be able to be willing to continue with the business at the same time, right? Because if I'm too caught up on selling, and I kind of, not even to keep my eye off of the ball, but I'm just like mentally kind of checked out. If I don't have a vision for the future of the business, now I kind of have to sell.
Yeah.
And if I have to sell, that's a horrible negotiating situation.
100%.
So, but yes, I also want to be able to sell on a good offer. Like if I get an offer, I'm like, I want to be able to sell, and I want to have a plan. Because if I don't have a plan for what I would do next, now I can't sell because I'm so caught up in the future. So have you seen, folks that can manage that or balance that well?
Well, they balance it well when I think they understand, are they going to be checked out? Are they tired? Like to really, be self-reflective on that. And, so forget about the money part. That usually works itself out. But if you're passionate about the business, understand your role could change. When you may not be the CEO anymore, you might be chief technology officer, or they might move you to the side because they want you around, but they don't want you running it anymore, depending on the... So I think you've got to know what you want out of this and recognize that you've got to give to get. And you might have a 3-year, and if there's a shotgun that you can get out at some point, whatever those terms are, just make sure you know what you want out of this, both personally, professionally, and and to make sure that that's part of the deal, not just the money part. Because when you're checked out, I've just seen this. And then they're depressed, and they got the potential of 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars in the bank, and they're depressed. I'm going, why should you be depressed? Look what's coming. Because humans are humans. We're emotional beings. So we got to fulfill that part of our lives.
Yeah, I find I've been involved in a couple of cases, worked with a couple of folks who that actually makes it worse. Because now they've had this big financial success. Yeah. And the fact that they're not happy with all this money actually even makes it more kind of problematic. So it ends up being kind of this double whammy for them. Is like now they don't have the company, and now they're not really happy with the money, and they realize that it's, they've got to figure something else out. I mean, I work with folks that kind of existential crisis kind of thing, and we find all sorts of, work that we have to do around this.
Well, it comes back to, at the end of the day, as humans, it's the same argument you could make for retirement, right? So what happens when you retire? And I think there were lots of books written on this. And they say, is it the money? Is it the work? No, it's the relationships. You sell your business, all those 200 people that revered you are gone, and they're not your friend. So then, I didn't make investments in my family. I don't know my kids. Every relationship I've had is transactional. That's gone. Now what do I do? As opposed to, I'm investing in all those parts of my life that we talked about earlier, including my friendships, relationships, formates, whatever you want to do. And now it just softens the blow a little bit. And then on the other side of whatever you have with cash, now you're saying, okay, I got more time to focus on and this part of my life, as opposed to I'm standing at the starting line going, now what do I do? That's a horrible thing for those entrepreneurs, because they should enjoy the fruits of their labor. And I don't know if some of them do, but they're very rare. They need a year to reset. And I'm saying you should be balanced a little bit more before you get to that place. At least from what I've seen. Those folks figure it out are so much happier when they exit.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned yoga. Anything else that you do in terms of your kind of practices and way in which you kind of find a little bit of balance? Because you're still going strong with the business, but I get the sense that you've created a little bit of balance in your life around this stuff. What other strategies do you have?
So my goals are pretty simple. So golf is my competitive outlet. I need to have something to kind of drive me crazy, I guess would be the best word, because golf is that kind of thing. And yoga is both fitness and not spiritual in the religious sense, but spiritual in terms of centering myself to focus on myself. And I think that's important. Those are the two activities I have, and of course learning. That I'm just thirsty for learning on new ways to do things. And I invest in people. Like, relationships matter to me. I mean, I'm a personal branding guy, but I believe in investing in people I want to spend time with. And so I nurture relationships. I have virtual coffee with people. I have coffee with people, whatever that is, because that stuff matters. And most people only network for transactions, not transformation. And I network because I care about the people that I want to have in my world. And oh, by the way, I've shed all the bad people in my life. I don't want you. You're a taker. I don't need you in my life. I want givers, people like me who love life and who love people and want to help people. I got a lot of that in my life, and I'm so fortunate and so grateful, because that gives you the pleasures that you just can't buy.
Yeah, that really is true. So tell me a little bit about where you want to take your business at this point. I mean, you mentioned that you're doing some good personal branding work and stuff.
Yeah.
What's your vision for things?
Our vision is really simple. It's simple and it's big. We want to change the world. So what does that mean? So there are 2 or 3 million CEOs in the world. There are probably 10 million leaders in the world, right? And you work in the leadership space, so you understand this. The impact a leader has on the people that they touch is monstrous. So if we look at YPO as an example, 35,000 leaders, 140 odd countries. If all of them were doing their job the way that we do, in other words, helping people via their stories on helping the world, they will touch tens of millions of people. So our job is to inspire leaders to be the best of themselves. So you do that work yourself, right? You do that, you're very good at building your personal brand, but you do it for a very express reason, because it's part of your business. There are others, and I gotta tell you, Bruce, the stories we have will shake the very foundation you have. Every leader who has made it to a certain place has a story that you go. And they can help others through those stories or grow their business. So the work we have is to inspire as many people to do that as possible, to get out on LinkedIn and Twitter or X or Twitter and just share their knowledge with the world, their perspectives with the world, and that will change the world. The business itself, we're just trying to grow that to a place where the next 5 years, we got a place in something we could either sell to our employees or exit, or I'll just continue to do speaking gigs or whatever. I have no plan to retire. But that's we're having a blast because it's fun work. It's such fun work.
Yeah. That's great. Alan, it's been a pleasure. If people want to find out more about you, about the work you're doing, the agency, what's the best way to get that information?
Yeah, so you can look me up at LinkedIn. So Alan McLaren, simple. You could find me there, or strataoriginals.com. There's lots of resources for people to go learn about personal branding. And if you're an angel, just understand one thing: but good things happen when people know you, and when they don't know you, it's harder to have good things happen. So just make sure you're out there, and then all those other things happen a little bit easier.
Yeah, well said. Alan, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Bruce. Good to be with you as usual.